morning. Should I, how do I, is there a time? I mean, I know I need to get going within 7 minutes, but do I just start?
Yes.
Okay, all right, sorry. So my name is David Davies. I'm the interim head of the Department of Music. So this is my first time being involved in this process, so I apologize for I didn't bring a paper handout, but I can provide you with something if needed at some point.
No, if you would, just make sure Stacy has this.
Yes.
We have a shared drive that the committee's using, and we can put it on the shared drive.
Great. Okay. Great. So I have two requests to present to you all. First is what we would call the Department of Music Operations, and the second is a one-time funding request. So our operations request, I basically just tried to set up some questions and then go through and answer them. These funds we are requesting $135,000 for this, and our amount last year awarded was $100,000. I'll go through the difference, why the difference in the amount in a moment here. But what these are used, 100% of these funds are used for stipends for students. So you've already heard about the stipends with marching band, but this is for all of our other ensembles, right? So we have about 5 major ensembles in the department, and then a whole myriad of smaller ensembles as well. But these are funds that are for students involved in the major ensembles. And all major ensembles the membership is determined by audition. And any student on campus can be in any of the ensembles. It's like a merit-based system of getting into it, right? So anyone can go show up at auditions, and then we're placed in our 3 bands, or 2 choirs, or one of the jazz bands, or so on and so forth. There's a certain, there's an assumption that it's not your first time playing the instrument, right? If you're going to end up in one of the ensembles, so there's that. But it's not limited to music students necessarily, although understandably with 300 majors, the majority of the students do tend to be music majors, just because we can't keep adding ensembles to accommodate everyone. But we do have a mix in each one of our groups. These stipends are, it's very similar to what you heard with the marching band, in that the time commitment in these ensembles is very high. And these are all 1-credit classes as well. But it's a 1-credit class that meets 4 to 5 hours a week. It's essentially what happens. In recognition of the students' time commitment, and recognition of all of the work that they did to get to that point, to be able to be in that ensemble, and also in recognition of the service they provide to the campus community, we offer these stipends to the students. So the ensembles perform, we have about 200 performances on campus a year. And that includes solo performances. I would say in terms of the ensembles, that's probably closer to somewhere in the ballpark of 50 or less performances. But we also are involved in events put on by the development office, events put on by alumni office. We will often get requests from other departments on campus saying, we need music for this. Could you please help us out? Like I just got a request from the College of Engineering is hosting this big national conference, and we're working, and it's after classes have ended, like in the summer, and we're working on getting our steel drum ensemble to come out and do a big 20-minute kind of shindig for them. So we do that kind of stuff all the time, and our students are just expected to do that. So these stipends really help. It's an acknowledgement of that level of commitment of service to the community that these students are doing. Makes it possible for us to offer the concerts at no additional charge. Enrich the aesthetic life of our campus and community. And they also provide support for the athletic teams, although the bulk of that actually comes out of, that's in the other request, which I probably should have thrown that bullet point on there. And just so you all are aware, the SSF funding, like last year we received $100,000 in funding for this. That represents about 30% of what our required budget is for these amounts. So we are actively seeking funding from as many sources as we can find to help be able to support our students on this. And we use all of it. But this represents about 30% of our total budgeted amount. So why the requested amount? As the band has been growing, our department has also been growing pretty dramatically. We are kind of busting at the seams right now at right around 310 majors or so. We've plateaued at that amount largely due to space and instructional limitations, right? And so our operating budget has also not really increased with the growth of our student body. So that's put a lot of strain in various places in meeting these demands. So also our retention rates have increased dramatically. So we have a lot of students who are, we used to have more students needing to change majors or withdraw from participation after their sophomore year. And that has been going down over the last couple of years, which is great because we've been purposefully trying to work on our retention numbers in the department. But what that does is it creates an added strain on our budget for these stipends, because that means money that used to get freed up from students who are no longer participating the junior or senior year now still stays with those students while we're continuing to bring in new students. So it just adds kind of an added layer of stress on the budget. This is my first time going through this process in our department, but I got to add up all the numbers and see that our anticipated deficit for next year in our ability to fund our stipends is about $30,000 actually. So based on what we do is I collect numbers from the instrumental department head, the vocal department head, the keyboard division head, and they tell me what funds they need to be able to offer their stipends. We look at continuing students who we expect to not continue, add up all the numbers, and that's roughly the deficit we're looking at, which is in part why I requested additional funding. But I also wanted you all to be, just for full transparency, aware of other ways we're trying to meet that deficit need for the coming year as well. One thing I did discover after I put together my request, and I'll ask for your forgiveness on that and say let's chalk it up to my first time. I wasn't really sure where I was looking at things. I discovered after I submitted that we actually have $13,000 remaining in the SSF allocation from last year. That is not normal. Typically, the way we allocate the money, we always spend out of the SSF account first because we know those funds aren't supposed to roll over. And so we always make sure that all of that gets funneled directly to the students as quickly as possible. And so anyway, I discovered that I believe some of those funds were coming out of the other scholarship account, that out of the 60%, the other 60% instead of the 30%. And so that, anyway, that's still in there. And we're requesting permission to be able to, if we can use those funds as well next year, that helps us get to that, close that gap on that $30,000 also. We also have a reserve, a small reserve in our own, some of our department scholarship accounts, like money that comes from the provost and comes from the dean's office in the college that hadn't been fully spent out yet. Because we don't want to bottom out every single fiscal year. We had a small reserve. We can spend out of that as well to close that gap. So we are committed to meeting our what we have offered students in terms of these stipends. We're committed to that, but every dollar helps because we are in terms of what the need is and the funds we have available at the moment. We are currently looking to find ways to make that happen. What would happen if the funding were reduced or eliminated? As I mentioned, because we're already looking at a deficit here, really every dollar is important. Every dollar helps. I have a plan kind of based on if our funding remains constant or consistent from SSF, and I have a contingency plan if we have reductions from SSF. So I'm trying to kind of look ahead at different angles, but any level of support you're able to provide is greatly appreciated in helping us. Because when we spend, one thing I didn't mention, I know Dr. Hooper and Professor Clements both mentioned that there were reductions in SSF funding for their groups this year. As Dr. Cooper mentioned, and the department was able to make that up. So that was one thing I did this year is, and it's my first time working with these budgets, but I funneled money to make up for some of those reductions. But that is money that would have otherwise been used to support faculty student research projects, or that's our operating budget as a department. So it's not like that was money just sitting around. There were things as a department that we didn't do. So it's not like, I don't want to give the impression when they say, oh, the department was able to fund that. We canceled other things in order to move those funds around. Because as you've seen in these budgets, we don't tend to have a lot of bloat in what we're doing. And also, these sorts of stipends are just the reality of higher education in music as well, in terms of our competitors. So if the types of institutions that we now compete with as a department, a lot of them have massive endowments and are giving huge awards to students. We are still drawing those students, I think, because of the quality of our faculty, because of the atmosphere on campus when students get out here and they see what it's like. I think there's a lot of things that attract these students to A&M Commerce, beyond just the dollars, right? But this is not unique to us, this need to offer these stipends. And if anything, our amounts are really kind of right where they should be in terms of we're not giving massive stipends to these students. But if we were to have to reduce that dramatically, it would be very difficult to continue to compete with North Texas. I mean, that's honestly one of our biggest competitors. And when you look at what North Texas has with their budget compared to what we're able to offer, we're a small fish with a bunch of big sharks, right? In terms of what we're doing. So we're punching beyond our weight class. I don't know how many analogies I can throw out that, but I'll stop probably because I'll start giving bad analogies. So that's the request for our music operations. What questions can I answer for you all?
Beyond the students that are directly impacted in this program, what benefits do you see to student population?
To student population? Great question. Beyond this, so for students who aren't participating in the ensemble, I would say having a vibrant arts community on campus is important. I think one of the great things about A&M Commerce, with the way we're situated, kind of on the edge, on the frontier of a massive metroplex and a rural region, right? Like, we're drawing students from very different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so being able to offer here on campus, like a vibrant arts community, not every student takes advantage of that, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink, right? So, but I think what we're able to offer along with the art department and the theater department, having this nexus of performances serves the whole campus community, and it lifts, it really, even students who don't come to multiple concerts, even just going to one concert and being exposed to that, or having friends who went to a concert and are talking about something. I do think it's a part of that university experience of becoming a complete person. Yeah, so I think that there's a benefit there. And then on a more pragmatic level, these ensembles do provide a lot of services at events as well, and so we have the students involved in these groups are going and playing at something that the president's hosting, or at, when we had our 100 Years as Lions event, we had the brass choir there. So we're kind of the go-to, when we need something special, these are the students who go and serve the community in that way, at no cost to the university, but it's of some personal time cost for the students. Yeah.
You might mention this, but if students go to these concerts, is it free, or
they are free, yeah. And we are committed to not charging for concerts. It comes up every once in a while because a lot of our competitors do charge for concerts. But in part, I think because of where we are as a university, location-wise, we just want things to be as accessible as possible. Like, we don't want the students to have any reason to not come. That's why the bulk of our concerts are on Thursday nights, actually, because we want it to be easier for students to come to the concert, because a lot of them have weekend plans. So.
Have you all thought about still making it free for students, but when community and faculty come charging?
Yes, yeah, we have, and that's something we look at every year. We did start charging for the holiday gala that we do, and that is an event we do charge for. It's ticketed, it's less for students, it's more for community members and faculty. And there has been some talk about maybe charging for community members or faculty for like large ensemble events. But for the time being, we're hoping to keep it free if possible. We are looking to raise, do I have this slide? Oh, hey, I do have this. Sorry. Speaking of raising money, okay, so we do work with alumni. We do we're working to build an endowment, to build endowed funds in the department. We do give, like this year, for example, for the next academic year, we're awarding $38,000 of funds. That's part of that broader 60%. That's money that's coming out of endowed funds. That's what we're spending out of it. Right, so we've been building that and building that and building that. That's been going up every year by about $6,000 or $7,000. So we are really working as a department to try and build and establish a more diversified funding stream that we can draw from, and one that's more stable and established. So, and we recognize the need to do that because of the growth in the department, because it's grown to the size it has. We really need to have those kinds of funding streams to draw from. So we are trying to do that. Working, especially one of the things we're doing too also is trying to work more with alumni, with our music alumni in particular. Unfortunately, the vast majority of our alumni are teachers, music teachers, which is, I think that's fabulous. I just mean in terms of getting money from them, it's not, we don't have a lot of doctors who are alumni. Okay, well, I have another request to show you all. This one is this is a one-time funding request. Let's see. This one. Okay, so our one-time funding request. It wasn't clear. I've seen this called a couple different things in the files that I was looking through. Sometimes this is referred to, you may have, if you've done this in years past, as the small ensemble SSF request. I've seen it show up that way, because we often submit this request every year as a one-time request. These are funds that go to help support presentations and activities in our smaller student groups, right? So kind of like what the marching band presented to you with their, wanting to go to Indianapolis. That's a huge expense, but we also have some small ensembles in the department, like a trombone choir, a trumpet choir, a flute choir. We have jazz bands, those sorts of groups, piano students, like piano ensembles, that go and present at conferences, and they get invited to festivals, international events, national conferences, and there are travel expenses associated with that. We also have a lot of students who go down to TMEA down in San Antonio. Pretty much every year, our students, our smaller groups, are traveling out to do these things. And we make this one-time funding request to ask you to support these trips for the students. I can give you some specifics about where this money, the money that was awarded for this year, which I believe was about $7,000, where that's going for the students. And the way, this is a little tricky, because the way the cycle works, students we have groups that have presented, they've submitted requests to do presentations, but they don't know yet if they're going to be accepted, because those announcements typically come late summer, early fall. So what we do is we tend to base the request on the previous year's need and go from that. And every year we have groups that need to do this. With the number of groups we have and how active they are, there's never been a lack of need for support for the students to be going out and traveling. In fact, this year, we had so many big events with our students that I wasn't able to give as much support for students going to TMEA as we typically do, because we did have a couple student groups go down to San Antonio to perform at the Texas Music Educators Association meeting, which is about 20,000 people. It's a huge event. Typically we support that, but we had our trumpet ensemble was invited to perform at the ITG, it's the International Trumpet Guild, national conference in Miami this summer, and that's an expense because they have to go stay at the conference. There's a group of about 12 trumpet players going for that, and so I had to set aside a chunk of that money of this SSF request to go to that. We're giving them about $3,000. The clarinet studio also got invited to perform at an International Clarinet Association. Thankfully, the international meeting is going to be in Tennessee this year. So that drove the cost down, but I'm giving them $3,000 out of that amount. And then the choir went down to TMEA this year. I think you all were told about that yesterday. But that was a huge expense to bring the choir down there. And we ended up needing to use some of those funds to contribute to that as well for TMEA. But that's where the funding went for this year. We have also had and I should mention too, these are partially funded, so it's not like we're like the trumpet studio. or the clarinets. That's like an $18,000 trip for them to go there. I'm giving them $3,000, right? So then the department is kicking in another $3,000 out of its own operating budget. The dean is contributing a lot, and the provost was very supportive as well, right? So, and that's sort of what we do. Well, I know I've got this amount. But those SSF funds are so helpful because it's the seed amount that shows the level of commitment from the university, and it lets the students say, it lets the students give that initial acceptance, like yes, we can accept this because we know we've got this amount, and then they all start working. And I know, for example, both the clarinet and the trumpet studios, each of those students are kicking in about $150 to $300 of their own money as well individually to be able to do this. So. These aren't fully funded, none of these are fully funded, but we draw from as many sources as we can to make it happen. What are we hoping to support in the next academic year? These four groups, the main attraction jazz ensemble, the percussion ensemble, the trumpet ensemble, and the flute choir, all have a couple different proposals out. So I'm anticipating at least 3 ensemble events needing to occur, these small ensembles. These funds go for bus transportation, instrument transportation, lodging, meals, registration programs, all of that. And it depends, it's what the budgets are set once we know where they're going and what they're going to be doing. I put this up here. This is my instrument transportation, right? Because it's a xylophone. So that's where the funds tend to go. And that's what's on the docket for next year. As I mentioned, we'll know late summer, early fall when those acceptances come in. What would happen if we're not able to support these activities? The students in these groups, these are often life-transforming experiences. Getting to go and be present at like the preeminent professional event in your field, right? To go to the International Trumpet Guild, which is the most prestigious group in the U.S. of trumpeters, being able to do that. These are life-changing experiences for the students involved. It also, it would make it difficult. It helps with recruiting, right? Being able to offer this to students, being able to show that if you come here to A&M Commerce, we as a university will support you in doing these sorts of activities. And it also would impact our growing regional reputation, right? So our growing reputation, being present at all of these events is a benefit to our students as well. Because it is a benefit to them as the reputation of our university improves and grows and broadens. That is a help when you're an alum, right? And so that makes your degree even more valuable. So, what questions can I answer in regards to our one-time funding request? very much for your time, and if I didn't meander, if I didn't go too long on that, so